thing I would have loved to see from Carney and from Canada, which I'm not, which I don't really think I'm ever going to see, which is like going beyond "we will not be bullied" to saying we will not, for example, join US in bullying the rest of the world. We won't be bullies. That would be cool, but that's not where we're at, and that means that geopolitically, um, the what we're talking about is a dispute inside of the Western elite, right? Like Carney could not be a more representative of transatlantic, America's England capital. He was a banker. He was a Goldman Sachs banker. He was the governor of the Bank of England. Why is a Canadian the governor of the Bank of England unless Canada and England are not real things and there's some kind of elite that is in charge of this whole thing? And so Carney, um the way that he talks about like what we're not going to be bullied and we need to rethink, and he is addressing Europe, he's addressing England, he's addressing the West, and he's trying to say we need to have an alternative inside of the West to this kind of Trump approach. It's, to me, it's not that different from the Republicans and the Democrats. They agree on genocide. They agree on bullying the rest of the world. They agree on sanctions. Canada continues to sanction Russia. Canada continues to list all of the, resistance organizations as terrorists. Canada continues to prosecute pro-Palestine protesters. So Canada is doing all the things that America does and wants done, but they don't want to transfer all the resources in this lawless, disorderly way from Canada to the States. They want to do it in an orderly way. They want to do it in an incremental way.
Trump seems dead set on kind of blowing up the global economy because this week trade talks between the US and Canada, or sorry, last week collapsed, and the Trump administration followed through immediately with 50% tariffs on $20 billion in Canadian goods, hitting everything from dairy and alcohol to cement and even Canadian hockey equipment. Mark
Woo!
Carney, Canadian Prime Minister, is framing this as a war, with Canada preparing to match Trump dollar for dollar with retaliatory tariffs on US steel, dairy, appliances, agricultural equipment, pulp and paper, and electronics, set to hit September 8th. So, what actually blew up these talks, and is war the right word for what's happening between two countries that share the world's longest border and until 5 minutes ago called each other allies? To break it down, we're joined by Justin Podur, a Toronto based writer and geopolitical analyst. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. What's going on?
Well,
Is something wrong?
oh, no, I think you're great.
Everything, Justin, everything is
Well,
wrong.
yeah, everything.
Like, I don't know where do you that's a
Everything's
big
wrong.
question. You gotta be more specific.
Yeah.
I meant technically, but yes, on all accounts for sure.
Question is any
Thankfully, is anything right is the question. Well, Justin, trade talks fell apart right before the deadline, with both Canada and the US blaming each other. Carney says the US pulled last minute changes that were unfair and uneconomic, while Washington says Canada walked back its own commitments and made new demands. From where you sit, what actually happened here? Is this a genuine breakdown, or was Trump always going to blow up these talks regardless of what Canada put on the table?
Yeah. So I think it's Trump's fault. I think that it's like the history of Canada US relations is so long, it's so seamless. And the basis of every previous version of the free trade agreement, which started as, I think, an auto agreement in the 1980s, no tariffs on auto. Um, and then it moved on to NAFTA, 1994, which started the Zapatista rebellion in Mexico, and then Kuzma and USMCA, and now they've broken down. But the basis of every single one of these deals for these decades was America demanding a bunch of things and Canada giving them to them. That's it. Like that's the pattern of negotiation. That's all anybody would have expected. But Trump has this pattern of asking for something, getting that, and then asking for something else. And so, from the way that these negotiations unfolded were uh, several rounds. It's happened multiple rounds since Trump became president this time, which is that Canada has gone and given massive concessions, and then Trump has changed the deal. And Trump wanted to change the deal on top of the deal that he previously got, and then the latest list of demands, which I one way or another got out, were really crazy. Like it was like America gets a veto over any new infrastructure spending that Canada does. America gets a veto over any deal Canada makes with any other country. So it
Normal
was
stuff.
really, yeah, it was really total annexation, and so it was just like that Trump pattern of changing the deal until it's totally unacceptable. And now the talks have blown up. So I think Trump has this philosophy, like, people have been reading this Roy Cohn biography and The Art of the Deal. Like Trump has this philosophy, I think, like pretty explicitly in terms of how he negotiates, which is if they say yes, it means you asked for too little, right? So he got a yes and then he got another yes on top of it, and he kept going until he got a no. And that's where we are now.
Ugh, who says no to Donald Trump? Is that even allowed?
You
But
just
so,
had
okay,
China.
that's true. Only China says that. You have to be imagine you can only that's actually the only way to say no if you're like China or Russia.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're kind of screwed. Um, but your prime minister, Mr. Carney, says Canada will match Trump's tariffs dollar for dollar with retaliation on steel, dairy appliances, sorry, not dairy appliances, dairy and appliances, which I guess would also be dairy
Yeah,
appliances,
those
but also
2.
agricultural equipment, pulp and paper, and electronics, all that, of course, kicking in September. So, what does dollar for dollar actually mean for two economies this lopsided in size? Like, obviously, Canada is much smaller than the US. I mean, can Canada really inflict comparable pain on the US, or is this more about like domestic politics showing Canadians that Carney is standing up to Trump than it is a serious economic countermeasure?
I think both of those things are true. So I was a little surprised last time months ago when negotiations fell apart and how feisty all the Canadian politicians were, except Alberta, which is a special case. But pretty much even the right, the center right and the right were all taking this position that we can't just be pushed around like this. And again, Trump has disincentivized agreement and surrender because he doesn't accept surrender and he doesn't accept concessions. He just asks for more. So now, people who really want to agree, people who really want to, capitulate, are in an awkward political position, including the Canadian right, are in a bit of an awkward position because saying no to Trump is popular in Canada. It's cool, which I didn't. It's not something I would have thought would have happened. So it is political capital to say no to Trump, but the lopsidedness I think is a bit complicated because it's um, it's really not a time for Trump to or for the U.S. to get into a trade fight right now, given all the things they have going on. It's pretty surprising that they would blow up the deal with Canada because yes, it's lopsided in terms of in more than lopsided. I would say that the issue is the integration of the economies. It's hard to imagine, um, you know, uh, like agriculture, industry, everything goes both ways really freely. Tourism, it's really hard to imagine. I was in the because the first time this happened, I would go to the grocery store and I would look at labels for produce and I would make sure that I got the Canada, and there were little skits about like how you should buy instead of Charmin toilet paper, you should buy Royale toilet paper. And like don't you understand? We're in a trade war. You can't be using American toilet paper.
What
But
a way to show
everything
your
in
patriotism. What a way to show your patriotism. I had never thought about that before. Wow.
and I
Wipe
buy
your
from
ass with
Mexico,
Canadian toilet paper.
but but they did a clever thing though. Like they back then they had clear labeling like USA, made in Canada, made in Mexico. But now they've started to do this thing where they say made in USA or Canada, or like made in Canada, USA or Mexico. And so it's sort of like they're trying to make it impossible for people. I think that's my sense is like I've never done this type of labeling before. But I think the labeling is now part of the trade war, which is like we're not going to tell you what's made in Canada or not, so you can't shop that way. But the integration is a serious thing. It is lopsided, but there is certain critical minerals, critical energy resources, crude oil specifically, and there are some huge, contracts that Canada has with the U.S. that are absorbing huge amounts of money that nobody has even mentioned. I imagine they're still going to go through. There's a multi tens of billions of contract to buy the F-35, which is just proceeding. Nobody's talking about it. We're at war apparently, but we're going to buy 86 billion worth of F-35 fighter jets from America. So lopsided, yes. Insincere, yes. Integrated, yes. But there are serious problems that the U.S. would have too if these retaliations proceed. So I don't think Trump or the U.S. can, whatever they're blustering now. I don't think they can just blow off the idea that Canada would do retaliatory tariffs in some of these areas.
I mean, it is interesting that it has become a point of political capital to
Mhm.
voice opposition to the United States and push back. I mean, famously, I think it was in Davos that Mark Carney
Oh yeah.
gave what some interpreted to be kind of this anti-imperialist declaration, didn't mention the United States, but said like, we will not be bullied. Of course,
Mhm.
then, goes back to tightness with the United States. But all that to say, now, once again, we hear Mark Carney take a more kind of combative, perhaps patriotic tone, not calling this a dispute or a rough patch, but saying it's an attack, that Canada's at
Mhm.
war. And, as you said, this is coming from a leader of the country that is one of the most integrated economies and closest security partners that the US has. So, what would it mean geopolitically for a relationship like that to rupture this openly? Is this rhetoric, or are we watching something more structural, like a real reordering of how Canada thinks about its relationship to Washington? I know that Canada had suppose important talks with EU leaders this week about kind of pivoting to the EU in the wake of this US aggression. So, talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, like there's a thing I would have loved to see from Carney and from Canada, which I don't really think I'm ever going to see, which is like going beyond "we will not be bullied" to saying "we will not," for example, join US in bullying the rest of the world. We won't be bullies. That would be cool, but that's not where we're at, and that means that geopolitically, um, the what we're talking about is a dispute inside of the Western elite, right? Like Carney could not be a more representative of transatlantic, America's England capital. He was a banker. He was a Goldman Sachs banker. He was the governor of the Bank of England. Why is a Canadian the governor of the Bank of England unless Canada and England are not real things and there's some kind of elite that is in charge of this whole thing? And so Carney, um the way that he talks about like what we're not going to be bullied and we need to rethink, and he is addressing Europe. he's addressing England, he's addressing the West, and he's trying to say we need to have an alternative inside of the West to this kind of Trump approach. It's, to me, it's not that different from the Republicans and the Democrats. They agree on genocide. They agree on bullying the rest of the world. They agree on sanctions. Canada continues to sanction Russia. Canada continues to list all of the resistance organizations as terrorists. Canada continues to prosecute pro-Palestine protesters. So Canada is doing all the things that America does and wants done, but they don't want to, they don't want to transfer all the resources in this lawless, disorderly way from Canada to the States. They want to do it in an orderly way. They want to do it in an incremental way. They want to, share the stolen wealth probably a little bit differently than Trump proposes. So it's really like a bull in a china shop. The threat of Trump kind of wrecking a good thing, right? An orderly kind of imperial system where everybody gets paid and everybody participates in the plunder, as opposed to Trump, who's trying to he's trying to take too much for himself and his group and the U.S., which could spoil the whole thing for everybody. I mean, that's what he's doing in Iran, right? He's spoiling the whole thing for everybody. He's crashing the whole global economy. The Zionist kind of war on Iran is like destroying the whole global economy. And that is something I think the whole elite in Canada and England and France and Germany, everywhere, are trying to figure out, with no great ideas, um, what to do about that.
Yeah, and I think they're mistaken to think it's a Trump problem, though part of it is like,
Mhm,
yes, due to like
mhm.
Trump's style. Um, but it's not just a Trump problem, it's actually an America problem. Um,
Yeah.
and on that, I want to dig into this a bit more because, like you're mentioning, this is not happening in isolation. Trump has also just, confirmed a hike in Canadian auto tariffs to 50% starting next year. And then this fits into this broader pattern of this administration using tariffs as this blunt force instrument of pressure across the globe. And it's against rivals and allies alike. So, Justin, you are someone who studies empire and geopolitics. What does it tell you that Washington is willing to escalate economic pressure campaigns even against its closest and most integrated partners? Is this a sign of strength? Or does it look more like a desperate and out of control superpower overreaching in a self destructive way?
Yeah, definitely door number 2. But, strength is relative, right? So this is what bullies do. They bully the people they can bully. And so again, like taking Latin American resources for free, and taking, for that matter, like Canadian resources from indigenous territories, having Canada do that for you and then get them to market. These are like the patterns of the North American economy of the Americas for centuries. Um, but you're right that it's not a Trump problem, because you can imagine the next president. You can not It's hard to imagine the next president then coming in and saying, "Okay, let's go back to the way things were." Right? I think that's why, that when you kind of try to imagine that experiment, like, you see that things don't just get, like, the politicians get worse and worse, but that's because the politics get worse and worse. And so Trump is here to try to solve some problem that comes from, you had Kenneth on just now. Like, it comes from the fact that the total one-sided domination economically and militarily that the West had over the world for 150 years or 200 years is not really the case anymore. China's a bigger economy. China's responsible for so much more of the manufacturing. China's actually innovating. And militarily, Iran is doing things that the U.S. can't seem to answer and can't seem to defeat. So both of these things are like causing America to look around and say, okay, well, we can't squeeze these powers. So let's squeeze the ones we can squeeze, and let's squeeze them harder so that we can try to get more surplus, and like we can try to get more profits out of these areas and possibly use these to change the balance. So I do think it is decline in that sense. Like I do think that the free ride of taking everything from everyone at will is not there. And so the idea is, yeah, let's squeeze our vassals, let's squeeze our allies, let's find collaborators to do that. And that's another thing that surprised me about Canada's politics. I don't know if you have a question on this later, but like um, there are I would have thought there would be more ready collaborators for an American for a capitulation to the U.S. And so far, there's pretty much only Alberta right now. Um, Even the Ontario premier, which is really right wing, he doesn't. He's had some of the harshest comments about Trump. They're going back and forth now, but um, yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that the entire Canadian political spectrum is now anti-imperialist, and against
They're no
and
anti-Trump, I would
perhaps
say, not
Marxist
anti-imperial.
against the extraction of surplus value.
Right, right.
Um, but I think it's very important to kind of understand this because again, how does understanding Canada as a junior partner in U.S. imperialism, and
Mhm,
also knowing that the U.S. will not hesitate to turn on its,
mhm.
you know, this important ally is important to understanding this moment. But Justin, that's all we have time for. So thank you so much for joining us here at BT Live. We will be coming. You are now our Canadian war correspondent.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
uh,
you're our
The Canada War, yeah.
we're
Like,
deputizing you.
get one of those
Our
helmets
resident
and
our
stuff.
resident Canada correspondent.
so
Yeah,
thank you for
I'm here for it.
reporting bravely
Yeah,
from the front lines. I was
yeah,
in
yeah.
Canada in January and I loved seeing the Made in Canada tags everywhere. I was like, yeah, let's drum up that patriotism as the Canadian dollar is at its worst. I love it. Um
It's fruit.
but
They're
truly.
not letting you do it with fruit. It's like there's a whole fruit situation. They won't even tell you which
Also,
continent it's made on.
just listen, all I gotta say is I'm buying Canadian toilet paper from now on. That's what I've learned from this segment, is gotta buy
Look for
Canadian
a
toilet paper.
look for a French name. So if it's like Royale, something like that,
Yeah,
it's probably
yeah.
Oh yeah.
The
Oh
the
yeah.
queen on it.
Incredible. And good, yeah, no, let's not even talk about the fact that Canada, still has respects the queen. But that's an empire that we'll address in a different moment. Again, Justin, thank you so much. Glad that we have you again on the front lines, and we'll be coming back to you soon.
I'll be here.